The night Ethan Miller learned his name could be erased, he was standing in the rain with $80 missing from his bank account and a bouquet of white roses dying in his hand. The phone pressed against his ear felt colder than the Chicago air, and Caleb Reed's voice came through with the calm precision of a man canceling a dinner reservation instead of ending 2 years of love. "The engagement is over, Ethan. I found someone who fits my life better." For one terrible second, Ethan thought the rain had stopped just so the city could hear his heart break. He stood beneath the glowing awning of the Bellamy Grand Hotel, downtown traffic hissing past in silver sheets, his old white suit soaked at the shoulders, the sleeves a little too short, the collar polished shiny from too many pressings. He had dressed that afternoon with hope. He had looked in a cracked bathroom mirror and told himself that love did not care about family names, bank accounts, or the quiet way rich people measured a man who had too little protection and too many dreams. Caleb had promised forever. Caleb had promised that tonight, in front of friends, business partners, and both families, he would take Ethan's hand and announce that he had chosen him. Instead, through the glass doors, Ethan saw Caleb standing beneath a chandelier beside Nora Vale. Nora was beautiful in the effortless, expensive way Ethan had never been, with pale blonde hair styled perfectly, an ivory evening gown that looked like it belonged on a society page, and one graceful hand resting on Caleb's arm as if it had always belonged there. Behind them, the gold sign that should have carried Ethan's name had already been changed. The hotel staff had removed him so cleanly it was as if he had never existed at all. Ethan tried to speak, but his voice came out small. "Caleb, what are you talking about?" There was a pause, then Caleb sighed, tired and embarrassed, as if Ethan were the problem. "Do not make this harder than it has to be. My parents were right. You and I were never going to work." Ethan looked down at the roses. Rainwater slid from the petals and struck the sidewalk like tiny white tears. "You told me you loved me this morning. I cared about you," Caleb said, lowering his voice. "But caring is not enough. Nora's family can help me. She fits my life. You do not." Through the glass, Caleb turned slightly, and their eyes met. For a moment, Ethan saw guilt. Maybe even fear. Then Caleb looked away first, and that hurt more than the words. Ethan had survived cold apartments, unpaid bills, polite insults from Caleb's friends, and the quiet ache of being treated like a secret that had stayed too long. But this was public. This was a room full of people pretending not to stare while watching him disappear. "So that is it?" Ethan asked. "After 2 years?" Caleb's answer was soft, almost kind, and crueler because of it. "Go home, Ethan." The call ended. Ethan lowered the phone slowly. His screen reflected his pale face back at him beneath rain-darkened brown hair. A few guests near the entrance glanced in his direction, then looked away. One woman covered her mouth. A man in a gray suit whispered something that made his companion laugh under her breath. Ethan wanted to run, but his legs would not move. He wanted to cry, but his pride, the last fragile thing he owned, held the tears behind his eyes. Then Caleb came outside. Nora stayed near the doors, warm and dry beneath the golden light, watching with a careful expression Ethan could not read. Caleb did not step fully into the rain. He stopped at the edge of the awning, close enough to speak, far enough not to get wet. "You should not have come," he said. Ethan almost laughed. "It was my engagement party." Caleb flinched, then pulled a folded envelope from his coat. "There is some cash in here. Enough for a cab, maybe a motel for a few nights. I will send more later." Ethan stared at the envelope as if it were something dirty. "You are paying me to leave quietly?" Caleb's jaw tightened. "I am trying to help you." "No," Ethan whispered. "You are trying to feel better about what you did." Caleb's softness burned away. "Be realistic. You were always going to drag me down. I have responsibilities. I have a future." Ethan stepped back. "Then go enjoy it." He placed the ruined roses on the marble ledge beside the door, arranging them carefully even though his hands were shaking. He would not throw them. He would not give Caleb the satisfaction of watching him break. Caleb said his name once, but Ethan had already turned away. He walked down the sidewalk into the rain with no umbrella, no ride, and nowhere safe to go. Across the street, behind the tinted window of a black town car, Adrian Cross watched the entire scene in silence. The men beside him were discussing numbers, territory, and a private meeting waiting inside the hotel, but Adrian had stopped listening the moment Ethan lifted his chin instead of begging. Adrian had seen powerful men collapse under less humiliation. He had seen liars smile through ruin and cowards dress themselves as kings. But this young man, soaked to the bone and abandoned under a city full of lights, had picked up his broken dignity with trembling hands and carried it away. "Boss?" his driver asked carefully. Adrian did not answer at first. His silver-gray eyes followed Ethan as he turned toward the narrow service lane beside the hotel. The rain blurred the glass, turning the street into neon and shadow. Then Adrian saw 3 men detach themselves from the alley wall and move after him. Not fast. Not loud. Just close enough to make the air change. Adrian's expression went still. "Cancel the meeting," he said. The man beside him blinked. "Sir?" Adrian opened the car door, and cold rain swept into the vehicle. "I found something more important." Ethan did not notice the men at first. The rain was too loud, striking the pavement in silver sheets, spilling from the hotel awning behind him like the city was trying to wash the night away. He walked with his head down, one arm wrapped around his middle, his phone dead in his pocket, his shoes filling slowly with cold water. Every step took him farther from the golden windows of the Bellamy Grand Hotel, but somehow the shame followed him, bright and merciless. He could still hear Caleb's voice, calm and practical, telling him he did not fit. Not angry. Not heartbroken. Practical. As if Ethan were a jacket that had gone out of style, a reservation that needed to be cancelled, a mistake that could be handled with an envelope of cash. The service lane beside the hotel was narrow and poorly lit, used mostly by delivery trucks and kitchen staff. Steam drifted from a vent near the brick wall, carrying the smell of fried onions, rain-soaked cardboard, and cigarette smoke. Ethan had chosen this way because he could not bear to pass the front entrance again. He did not want to see Nora standing in Caleb's light. He did not want to see guests in designer coats pretending they had not watched his life fall apart through glass doors. He only needed to find a subway station, a 24-hour diner, or any place warm enough to sit until morning. Then he heard footsteps behind him. At first, he told himself it was nothing. Chicago was never truly quiet, not even in the rain. But the footsteps did not pass him. They matched him. When he slowed, they slowed. When he moved closer to the wall, they moved closer too. Ethan's breath caught. He turned just enough to see 3 men at the mouth of the lane, their faces half hidden beneath dark hoods. They were not dressed like hotel guests. They were not lost. The tallest one smiled like he had been waiting for Ethan to look back. "Long night?" Ethan's stomach tightened. "I do not want any trouble." His voice sounded steadier than he felt. The man lifted both hands in a show of innocence that did not reach his eyes. "Neither do we. We just have a message to deliver." Ethan took one careful step back. "Then deliver it to Caleb Reed. I am not with him anymore." The man's smile widened. "That is exactly why this is easy." Those words struck Ethan colder than the rain. Caleb's name should not have been in a stranger's mouth. The second man pulled a phone from his pocket and checked the screen. "Brown hair, gray-blue eyes, white suit. That is him." Ethan felt the world narrow to the broken glow of a street lamp above him. "Who sent you?" The tallest man tilted his head. "Someone who owed the Moretti family more than he could pay." For a moment, Ethan could not understand. Then the meaning arrived slowly, terribly, like water seeping under a locked door. Caleb had not only replaced him. Caleb had used him. Maybe not with a signed paper or an open confession, but somehow, in some desperate bargain, Ethan's name had been placed in the hands of men who saw him as leverage. The thought should have shattered him. Instead, something quiet and exhausted hardened inside his chest. "No," Ethan said. The man blinked. No? Ethan lifted his chin, rain running down his face like tears he refused to give them. Whatever Caleb promised you, I am not part of it. I belong to myself. The men exchanged a look, amused and impatient. The tallest one stepped forward. Ethan stepped back and struck the brick wall behind him. There was nowhere else to go. His hand found the dead phone in his pocket, useless and cold. He thought of screaming, but the hotel music was still spilling faintly from the ballroom, and the rain swallowed everything. Then the air changed. It was not loud. It was not dramatic. It was pressure, sudden and absolute, like every shadow in the alley had been ordered to stand still. The men stopped moving. Ethan saw their eyes shift past him, then widen with the kind of recognition that did not need explanation. A black umbrella appeared first, held by a man in a dark coat. Behind him, walking through the rain as if it had no permission to touch him, came Adrian Cross. Ethan did not know his name yet, but he knew power when it entered a space. Adrian was tall, composed, dressed in a black suit that looked untouched by the storm. His hair was dark, his face pale and sharp in the blue streetlight, his silver-gray eyes fixed on the men with chilling calm. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. Move away from him. The tallest man swallowed. Mr. Cross, this is a private matter. Adrian's gaze did not flicker. Not anymore. The name passed through the alley like a warning bell. Cross. Ethan had heard Caleb whisper that name once in a restaurant, when two men in tailored coats entered and every powerful person in the room suddenly found a reason to look down. Adrian Cross was not only a businessman. He was the kind of man people spoke about carefully, the kind of man whose silence carried more weight than another man's threats. The three men backed away, their confidence draining into the rain. We did not know he was connected to you, one of them said. Adrian finally looked at Ethan. Not over him. Not through him. At him. He is now. Ethan's breath stopped. The tallest man went pale. Understood. No one argued after that. The men disappeared toward the street, their footsteps quick and uneven. Ethan stayed pressed against the wall, shaking so hard he could barely feel his hands. Adrian stepped closer, then stopped several feet away, leaving space between them as if that space mattered. His umbrella bearer moved to cover Ethan, but Adrian took the umbrella himself and held it over Ethan's head. The sudden absence of rain made Ethan feel strangely fragile. Did Caleb Reed send them? Adrian asked. Ethan looked toward the bright mouth of the alley, where the hotel still glowed like another world. I think he sold them my fear because he had nothing else valuable enough. Something cold passed through Adrian's eyes, but his voice remained even. Then he was a fool twice. Ethan let out a broken breath that was almost a laugh. You do not even know me. I know enough. Adrian removed his coat and held it out, not touching Ethan, not forcing it onto his shoulders. You were left in the rain. You refused to beg. You refused his money. And when men came for you, you still said you belonged to yourself. Ethan stared at the coat, then at him. What do you want from me? Adrian's answer came without hesitation. Tonight? Nothing. The word settled between them, impossible and warm. You need dry clothes, a safe room, and a phone that works. After that, you decide what happens next. Ethan wanted not to trust him. Everything about Adrian Cross was dangerous, from the quiet men waiting near the black car to the way the alley itself seemed to obey him. But danger had warmed Caleb's smile tonight. Safety, strangely, stood in front of him holding an umbrella and asking for nothing. Ethan took the coat with trembling fingers. It was heavy, warm, and smelled faintly of cedarwood and winter air. Adrian turned slightly, giving him a clear path to the car instead of cornering him. You can walk away, Adrian said. I will not stop you. Ethan looked at the empty street. The dead phone in his pocket, the hotel where his name had been erased, and the alley where Caleb's betrayal had found him a second time. Then he looked at Adrian. And if I get in? Adrian opened the rear door of the town car. The interior glowed with soft amber light. Then no one touches your life again without answering to me first. Ethan stood in the rain for one last second, feeling the old version of himself hesitate at the edge of everything familiar and ruined. Then he stepped into the car. The inside of Adrian Cross's car was warmer than Ethan expected, not the sharp artificial heat of an expensive machine, but a steady comfort that wrapped around his frozen hands and made the ache in his fingers begin to thaw. He sat against the leather seat with Adrian's coat pulled around his shoulders, staring at the blurred city lights as the town car moved away from the Bellamy Grand Hotel. No one spoke for the first few blocks. The driver kept his eyes forward. The man in the passenger seat typed silently on a phone. Adrian sat beside Ethan with enough distance between them for another person to fit, his posture calm, his hands resting openly on his knees as if he understood that sudden movements would only make the night worse. That space unsettled Ethan more than force would have. Caleb had always touched him casually, publicly when it benefited him, privately when he wanted reassurance, but rarely as if Ethan's permission mattered. Adrian did not touch him at all, and somehow that made Ethan feel seen in a way he did not know how to handle. "Your phone is dead," Adrian said after a while. It was not a question. Ethan pulled it from his pocket anyway, the black screen slick with rain. "It died before I could call anyone. Is there anyone you want to call?" Ethan almost answered automatically. Then the truth caught in his throat. His family had stopped answering months ago after he chose Caleb despite their warnings. His coworkers knew nothing beyond the polite version of his life. Caleb had been his emergency contact, his future address, his planned last name, his entire map of tomorrow. Now that map had burned in his hands. "No," he said quietly. "There is no one." Adrian's face did not change, but the silence after those words felt heavier. He took a phone from the side compartment and placed it on the seat between them. "It is unlocked. Use it if you change your mind." Ethan looked at the phone, then at him. "You trust me with that?" "It is a phone, Ethan. Not a kingdom." Hearing his name in Adrian's voice made his chest tighten. Not because it sounded sweet. It did not. Adrian spoke like a man who had trained every word to obey him. But there was no mockery in it, no pity, no disgust. Just certainty. "How do you know my name?" Ethan asked. Adrian glanced toward the passenger seat. The man there answered without turning around. "Hotel reservation records, sir." Ethan stiffened. Adrian's eyes moved back to him at once. "I had him check after I saw what happened. Not before." "That is supposed to make me feel better?" "No. It is supposed to be the truth." Ethan looked away, folding his wet hands together beneath the coat. He wanted to hate the answer, but the plainness of it made that difficult. Adrian did not dress his actions in kindness. He simply placed the facts on the table and let Ethan decide what to do with them. Outside, Chicago slid past in streaks of red brake lights and blue reflections. They left the hotel district, crossed the river, and moved toward a quieter neighborhood where the buildings grew taller and older, their windows glowing like watchful eyes. Ethan had never been in this part of the city after dark. It looked wealthy without trying to impress anyone, which somehow made it more intimidating. "Where are you taking me?" he asked. "A house on Lakeshore Drive," Adrian said. "It has security, guest rooms, and staff who know how to mind their own business." Ethan's fingers tightened. "A house?" Adrian seemed to understand the fear beneath the word. "A safe place. Not a debt. Not a contract. Not a cage." Ethan let out a shaky breath. "People like you do not do things for free." For the first time, something almost like amusement touched Adrian's eyes. "People like Caleb do not do things for free. There is a difference." That should have sounded arrogant. Maybe it was. But Ethan had seen Caleb's version of kindness tonight, folded into an envelope like a receipt. Adrian's version had so far been dry warmth, distance, and a phone he did not have to ask for. The car turned through a private gate and entered a driveway lined with black iron lamps. The house beyond them was not a mansion from a fairy tale. It was stone, modern and severe, with wide windows facing the dark water of Lake Michigan. Rain swept across the glass like moving curtains. Two men at the entrance straightened when the car stopped, but no one rushed toward Ethan. No one grabbed his bag. No one asked questions. Adrian stepped out first, then stood aside with the door open. Ethan hesitated before taking his hand, then realized Adrian had not offered it. He had only opened the way. Ethan climbed out on his own. His knees wobbled slightly, but he stayed upright. Adrian noticed. Of course he noticed. He noticed everything. Inside, he said, not as an order, but as protection from the cold. The foyer smelled faintly of polished wood, rain, and cedar. A woman in her 50s with silver-streaked dark hair waited near the staircase, holding a folded towel and a soft gray robe. Her expression was composed, but her eyes warmed when they landed on Ethan. "Mr. Cross," she said, "the west guest room is ready." "Thank you, Mrs. Alvarez." She approached Ethan slowly, as if he were a frightened animal she refused to startle. "You must be freezing, honey. No questions tonight. Just warm clothes and tea." The ordinary kindness nearly broke him. Ethan had survived Caleb's rejection, the hotel's stares, the men in the alley, and Adrian's terrifying calm, but the word honey in a motherly voice made his vision blur. He took the towel with both hands. "Thank you." Mrs. Alvarez smiled softly. "You are safe here." Safe. The word felt impossible. Ethan followed her up the stairs, aware of Adrian remaining in the foyer below. He did not follow. He did not hover. He only spoke once, his voice carrying through the quiet house. "Ethan." Ethan paused on the third step and looked back. Adrian stood beneath the chandelier, dark against the warm light, rain still shining on his shoulders. "No one enters your room without your permission. Not staff. Not security. Not me." Ethan swallowed. "Why?" Adrian's gaze held his, steady and unreadable. "Because tonight someone made choices for you. In this house that ends." Mrs. Alvarez led Ethan to a room overlooking the lake, where dry clothes had been placed at the foot of a bed large enough for someone who had never learned to sleep small. When the door closed behind him, Ethan stood alone in the silence, Adrian's coat still around his shoulders and Caleb's words still echoing like ghosts. On the night he lost everything, the most dangerous man in Chicago had given him a locked door, a warm room, and the first real choice anyone had offered him in years. Ethan did not sleep as much as drift in and out of a fragile silence, waking every time the old house settled or rain tapped harder against the windows. The west guest room was warm, the bed was soft, and the door had locked from the inside with a quiet click that should have comforted him. Still, his body did not believe in safety yet. It waited for a voice in the hallway, for Caleb's apology, for a hidden price, for the moment when kindness turned into a contract. None came. Sometime before dawn, he rose from the bed wearing the plain gray sweats Mrs. Alvarez had left for him, folded Adrian's coat carefully over a chair, and walked to the window. Lake Michigan stretched beyond the glass, black and endless beneath the storm, its waves breaking against the shore with a steady, patient force. In the reflection, Ethan barely recognized himself. His hair had dried in uneven waves, his eyes looked too large in his pale face, and without the white suit, without the roses, without Caleb's ring waiting in some velvet box he would never see, he looked less like a discarded fiancé and more like a stranger who had survived the first night of a new life. A soft knock came at the door. Ethan froze. Then Mrs. Alvarez's voice followed, gentle and clear. "It is just breakfast, honey. I can leave it outside." Ethan looked at the lock, remembered Adrian's words, and opened the door himself. Mrs. Alvarez stood with a tray holding scrambled eggs, buttered toast, orange juice, and tea with honey. The smell of real food made Ethan realize he had not eaten since lunch the day before. "Mr. Cross said you might want something simple," she said. "He also said you do not have to come downstairs unless you choose to." Ethan stepped back to let her set the tray on the small table near the window. "Does he always give people choices after bringing them into his house?" Mrs. Alvarez gave him a look that was too knowing to be casual. No. But he does when he thinks someone has had too many taken away. Ethan sat slowly. How long have you worked for him? 14 years. Then you know what he is. Mrs. Alvarez did not pretend not to understand. She folded her hands in front of her. I know what people call him. I also know what he does when no one is watching. Ethan waited. She seemed to choose her next words carefully. There are men in this city who enjoy being feared. Mr. Cross finds fear useful, but he does not enjoy it. That difference matters. After she left, Ethan ate in small bites, each one steadier than the last. Warmth returned to him slowly, not just to his hands and feet, but to the hollow place beneath his ribs where humiliation had spent the night. When he finally checked the phone Adrian had loaned him, there were no missed calls from Caleb. Not one. There was only a single message from an unknown number, sent at 4:16 in the morning. Do not contact Caleb again. You made the night embarrassing enough. Ethan stared at it until the letters blurred. Then another message appeared. Return whatever documents you took from his office, and this can stay polite. Ethan's breath changed. Documents? For a moment, he did not move. Then he stood so quickly the chair scraped against the floor. His hands shook as he crossed the room to the small overnight bag he had carried to the hotel, the one Caleb had mocked because it looked cheap beside the luggage Nora's family used. Inside were a change of clothes, a toothbrush, and a slim folder of paperwork he had planned to give Caleb after the engagement party. Caleb had asked him weeks ago to help clean up files for a small real estate company connected to Reed Holdings. Ethan was good with numbers. Quiet work, Caleb had called it. Nothing serious, just organizing old invoices and transfer records before a tax review. Ethan had found irregularities. Duplicate payments. Shell vendors. Names that changed by one letter. Accounts that should not have been connected but were. He had copied the records because something about them made his stomach twist, and because Caleb had become strange whenever Ethan asked questions. Last night, he had thought the folder was meaningless, just one more piece of a life he no longer had. Now, staring at the message, he understood it might be the reason those men had known exactly where to find him. A knock came again, this time lower, firmer. Ethan did not answer immediately. It is Adrian, came the voice from the other side. Mrs. Alvarez said you looked upset. I will leave if you tell me to. Ethan looked at the folder in his hands, then at the locked door. He opened it. Adrian stood in the hallway wearing a white shirt with the sleeves buttoned neatly at his wrists, his dark hair still slightly damp as if he had been outside again. He looked less like a savior in the morning light and more like a man carved out of control, dangerous not because he moved quickly, but because he never needed to. His eyes dropped to the folder. What is that? Ethan held it tighter. The reason Caleb may have sold me twice. Adrian's face went still. May I come in? Ethan stepped aside. Adrian entered only far enough to stand near the door, leaving the room open behind him. Ethan placed the folder on the table and spread the papers with trembling fingers. I thought I was helping him organize records. I found transfers from Reed Holdings to companies that do not seem real. Then I found the same companies connected to the Moretti family. I was going to ask him after the party, when we were officially engaged, because I thought he would tell me the truth. His voice broke, but he forced it back together. Instead, he erased my name from a sign and sent strangers after me. Adrian read in silence. His expression did not change, but the air in the room sharpened. Not with rage. With focus. Ethan, he said carefully, these are not just mistakes. These are trails. Someone moved a lot of money and used Caleb as a bridge. Ethan sat down because his knees no longer trusted him. So what happens now? Adrian looked at him for a long moment. That depends on what you want. Ethan gave a humorless laugh. I want yesterday to have never happened. I cannot give you that. Then I want him to stop deciding what my life is worth. Adrian closed the folder with one deliberate motion. That I can help with. Ethan looked up, Why would you? Adrian's gaze moved to the rain still crawling down the window, then back to Ethan. Because Caleb Reed looked at you and saw something disposable. The Morettas looked at you and saw leverage. I am looking at you and seeing the only person in this city who may have the truth in his hands. Ethan swallowed. And what do you want me to do with it? Adrian's answer was quiet enough to feel like a promise instead of an order. First, eat breakfast. Then, if you choose, we make him regret underestimating you. By noon, the storm had thinned into a gray drizzle, but the city outside Adrian Cross's house still looked washed out and uncertain, as if Chicago itself had not decided what kind of day it wanted to become. Ethan sat at the long kitchen table with the folder between his hands and a second cup of tea cooling beside him, listening to the soft rhythm of Mrs. Alvarez moving through the room. She did not hover. She did not ask about Caleb. She simply placed a plate of sliced apples and toast within reach, then returned to polishing already spotless silverware, as if giving him privacy was part of the household routine. Across from Ethan, Adrian had spread the copied records into neat columns. There were no dramatic reactions, no raised voices, no sudden commands. That calm frightened Ethan more than anger would have, because it made the truth feel solid. Real. Unavoidable. Adrian's people moved quietly in and out of the adjoining study, carrying laptops, making phone calls in low voices, and returning with printed pages that seemed to confirm the same terrible picture from different angles. Caleb Reed had not been a helpless man cornered by debts. He had been helping. Money moved through companies with empty offices, fake invoices, and names that vanished whenever someone looked too closely. Ethan had seen only the edges of it, but the edges were enough to cut him. He told me it was bookkeeping, Ethan said at last, his voice rough from too little sleep. He said I had a gift for numbers, and he trusted me more than anyone. Adrian looked up from the papers. He used the truth to hide a lie. You are good with numbers. That is why he wanted your hands on records he could later blame you for. Ethan went still. Blame me? Adrian slid one page across the table. His finger stopped beside a line where Ethan's initials had been added beside a transfer request he did not remember approving. The initials were almost right, but not perfect. The final letter leaned too sharply, like someone copying his handwriting from a birthday card. Ethan felt cold all over again. I did not sign that. I know. But someone wanted it to look like I did. Yes. Ethan stood abruptly, the chair legs scraping against the wood. Mrs. Alvarez paused at the sink but did not turn around. Ethan walked to the window, gripping the edge of the counter until the granite pressed hard into his palms. For 2 years, Caleb had called him sensitive whenever Ethan questioned anything. He had smiled and touched Ethan's shoulder in public while making private decisions that slowly narrowed Ethan's world. He had told Ethan not to worry about money, not to worry about contracts, not to worry about the way his family never included Ethan in serious conversations. Now Ethan understood. Caleb had not been protecting him from stress. Caleb had been keeping him blind. I was supposed to take the fall, Ethan whispered. Adrian's answer came from behind him, quiet and exact. If the Morettas turned on him, yes. If federal investigators found the transfers, also yes. A desperate ex-fiancée with access to records and no family support would have been convenient. The words landed with brutal clarity, but Adrian's tone did not make them cruel. He was not trying to wound Ethan. He was naming the wound so it could stop hiding inside him. Ethan closed his eyes. He saw Caleb under the hotel lights, clean and handsome and dry, offering him cash-like mercy. He saw Nora's ivory dress, the change sign, the careful way Caleb had stepped only to the edge of the rain. He had not wanted to ruin his shoes. He had ruined Ethan instead. I loved him, Ethan said, and the confession tasted humiliating. Adrian did not answer immediately. When he did, his voice had softened by only a fraction, but Ethan heard it. That was not your crime. Ethan turned back. It feels like one. Because people like Caleb teach you that trusting them was your mistake instead of their responsibility. Ethan looked at the folder, then at Adrian, then at the silent men waiting beyond the kitchen archway. What happens if I give these records to you? Adrian leaned back slightly. I can protect the originals, trace the companies, and make sure Caleb cannot bury what he did. But I will not take them from you. Why not? Because the moment I take control of your proof, I become another man deciding your future. Ethan hated how badly he wanted to believe him. And if I walk out with them? Adrian's expression did not change. A car takes you wherever you want to go. My security keeps an eye on you until you tell them to stop. Caleb and the Morettas still do not reach you. Even if I refuse to help you? Protection is not payment. The kitchen became very quiet. Ethan realized then that Adrian Cross was not offering safety the way Caleb had offered love, with invisible strings tied around every promise. Adrian was offering it like a locked door, a dry coat, a phone with no password, something placed within reach but not forced into his hands. That difference made Ethan's chest ache. A man entered from the study and stopped near the doorway. Mr. Cross, Caleb Reed has called 3 times. He is demanding to know whether Mr. Miller is here. Ethan flinched at the sound of his name in that context. Adrian did not look away from Ethan. Did he use Ethan's name? No, sir. He said the boy. Ethan's jaw tightened. The boy. Not Ethan. Not his fiancée. Not even his ex. Just a category, a problem, a misplaced object. Something inside Ethan settled with painful finality. He walked back to the table, picked up the forged page, and placed it on top of the folder. Call him back, Ethan said. Adrian watched him closely. Are you sure? Ethan's hands trembled, but his voice did not. No. But I am tired of being spoken about like I am not in the room. Adrian gave one small nod. The man at the doorway placed a secure phone on the table and connected the call through the speaker. It rang only once. Caleb's voice came sharp and strained. Finally. Listen to me carefully. If Ethan is there, send him out. He is confused, and he has something that belongs to me. Ethan stared at the phone. For a moment, the old fear reached for him. Then he saw Adrian across the table, silent, still, letting the choice remain his. Ethan leaned closer. I am not confused, Caleb. The silence on the other end was almost satisfying. Ethan? Caleb's voice changed instantly, softening into the old shape of affection. Thank God. You scared me. Where are you? Ethan looked at the forged initials on the page. Somewhere you cannot rewrite my name. Caleb inhaled sharply. You do not understand what you are involved in. No, Ethan said. For the first time, I think I do. Adrian's eyes held his, steady as the lake beyond the windows. Ethan placed his palm flat over the folder. And if these documents belong to anyone now, they belong to the truth. Caleb did not speak for several seconds, and in that silence Ethan heard the truth more clearly than any confession could have given it to him. The man who had once filled his apartment with flowers after every argument, the man who had kissed his knuckles in public just loudly enough for people to notice, the man who had promised that love was stronger than family pressure, had no words ready for an Ethan who answered back. Caleb knew how to handle tears. He knew how to handle pleading. He knew how to handle forgiveness because he had practiced asking for it in mirrors and receiving it from people who wanted to believe him. But he did not know how to handle Ethan's voice when it no longer bent around him. When Caleb finally spoke, the softness was gone. You have no idea what those papers can do. Ethan kept his palm on the folder, feeling the faint ridge of the forged initials beneath the top sheet. I think that is why you wanted them back before I learned. Caleb laughed once, sharp and nervous. You are sitting with Adrian Cross and pretending you are safer? Ethan, listen to yourself. He is not rescuing you. He is using you. Adrian did not react. He sat across the kitchen table as still as stone, silver-gray eyes lowered to the phone as if Caleb's accusations were weather, not worth answering. That restraint unsettled Ethan in a way that made his decision easier. Caleb had always defended himself loudly. Adrian let his actions stand in silence. Maybe he wants the documents, Caleb continued. Maybe he wants leverage over me. Maybe he wants leverage over everyone. Men like him do not open their doors for free. Ethan looked around the kitchen, at the tea Mrs. Alvarez had warmed twice without asking, at the clean clothes folded neatly near the hallway, at the security team waiting out of earshot unless called. Then he remembered the hotel awning, the envelope, the way Caleb had refused to step into the rain. You are right about one thing, Ethan said. I do not fully know Adrian Cross. But I know what he did last night. He gave me a door I could lock from the inside. You gave strangers my description. Caleb's breath hitched. That is not what happened. Then explain it. The line went quiet again. Somewhere on Caleb's end, Ethan heard muffled voices, a door closing, the faint clink of glass. He imagined Caleb hiding in some polished office, surrounded by people who had applauded his new engagement, while Ethan walked alone into the storm. I was under pressure, Caleb said at last. The Morettas were threatening my family. I had to give them something to delay them. Ethan's fingers curled slowly. Something? I did not think they would hurt you. You did not think about me at all. Caleb's voice cracked, but Ethan no longer trusted cracks. I was going to fix it. I was going to send someone after you before things got out of hand. You sent them after me first. The words landed so heavily that even Mrs. Alvarez, standing near the sink, closed her eyes for a moment. Adrian finally moved, but only to slide a glass of water closer to Ethan. He did not tell him what to say. He did not take over the call. He simply made sure Ethan had something steady within reach. Caleb seemed to sense the shift. His tone changed again, turning urgent, intimate, familiar in the exact way that used to undo Ethan. Ethan, baby, come on. This is us. You know me. You know I make mistakes when I panic, but I never wanted you gone. Nora means nothing. It was business. My parents pushed it, and I was trapped. You know how they are. Ethan closed his eyes, and for one painful second he was back in Caleb's apartment 6 months earlier, listening to the same voice promise that the coldness from his family would pass, that Ethan only needed to be patient, that someday they would all see how good he was. Someday had become a changed sign in a hotel lobby. Do not call me that, Ethan said. Caleb exhaled. Ethan. No. You lost the right to make my name sound like an apology. Across the table, Adrian's gaze lifted. There was something in his eyes Ethan could not name, something quieter than approval and warmer than curiosity. It gave Ethan courage without taking credit for it. Caleb's voice hardened. If you give those records to Cross, you will start a war you cannot understand. Adrian spoke for the first time, his voice calm enough to chill the room. The war started when you traded a person to cover a debt. Caleb went silent. Then he said, Cross. Adrian leaned back slightly. Reed. The two names carried the weight of different worlds colliding. Ethan felt the kitchen change around him, every person in the house becoming alert, though no one moved. Caleb tried to sound confident and failed. This is not your business. You made it my business when Moretti men followed him into an alley beside my meeting. He is not yours. The words came too fast, too possessive, too late. Adrian looked at Ethan before answering, as if asking permission without speaking. Ethan gave the smallest nod. Adrian's voice lowered. No. He is his own. That is the part you never understood. Ethan felt the sentence settle deep inside him, unlocking a place Caleb had kept closed for years. Caleb heard it too. His next words were careful, dangerous in their desperation. Ethan, if you stay there, you will regret it. People will say things. They will think you ran from one powerful man to another because you cannot survive alone. Ethan looked down at his trembling hand. Then he looked at the forged initials, the documents, the quiet room, the man across from him who had never once asked him to be smaller. Let them say it, Ethan replied. I know what happened. So do you. Caleb's voice dropped. What do you want? Ethan was surprised by how simple the answer felt. Not revenge, not exactly. Not even an apology. I want my name cleared before you can stain it. I want every false signature exposed. I want everyone who laughed last night to learn what you were hiding while they applauded. And I want you to stop calling me like I am something you misplaced." Caleb gave a low, bitter laugh. "You sound different." Ethan looked at Adrian again, then at the rain-softened lake beyond the windows. "No. I sound awake." He reached toward the phone, but Caleb rushed to speak. "Ethan, wait." Ethan paused, not because he owed Caleb another chance, but because he wanted to hear the fear he had mistaken for power. "Nora is not who you think she is," Caleb said quickly. "She has connections to Moretti. Her family pushed me into this too. If you release those files, you will not just ruin me." Ethan's heart slowed. "What are you saying?" Caleb's breath shook. "I am saying Nora Vale knows more than I do." The line went dead. The call ended so abruptly that the silence afterward felt staged, as if someone had cut the sound from the world and left only the ticking kitchen clock to prove time was still moving. Ethan stared at the phone, his hand still hovering above it, Caleb's last words replaying in his mind with a new and colder meaning. "Nora Vale knows more than I do." It should have sounded like another excuse. Caleb had always known how to point toward someone else when consequences began walking toward him. His parents. His business partners. His family name. Now Nora. But Ethan had seen Nora through the hotel glass, standing under golden light with one hand on Caleb's arm and no surprise in her face when Ethan arrived. Not guilt. Not confusion. Watchfulness. As if Nora had not stolen Ethan's place by accident, but stepped into it at the exact moment she had been told to. Adrian did not move for several seconds. Then he looked toward the man near the doorway. "Find everything connecting Nora Vale to the Moretti family." Quietly. The man nodded and disappeared into the study. Ethan let out a breath he had not realized he was holding. "Do you believe Caleb?" Adrian's eyes returned to him. "I believe frightened people sometimes tell partial truths when lies stop working. That is not the same as believing him." "No." Ethan sank back into the chair, suddenly aware of how exhausted he was. His body had survived one night on shock and rainwater, but now the shock was thinning, leaving behind a heavy ache in every part of him. The world he had understood yesterday had been cruel but simple. Caleb had left him for someone richer. Adrian had saved him from the consequences. The folder had made Caleb dangerous. But Nora being involved made the betrayal wider, more deliberate, less like a romantic humiliation and more like a door opening under his feet. Mrs. Alvarez set a fresh cup of tea beside him without a word. Ethan wrapped both hands around it. "At the hotel, Nora looked at me like she was waiting for something." Adrian leaned against the far counter, arms folded, giving Ethan the space to think aloud. "What kind of something?" "A reaction. Maybe a scene. Maybe she wanted me to cry in front of everyone, or yell, or beg Caleb to choose me. If I had done that, everyone would have remembered me as unstable." Adrian's expression sharpened. "And if you were later connected to forged records, that memory would help them." Ethan's stomach turned. "They were building a story." "Yes." The word was quiet, but it changed the room. Ethan had been embarrassed last night because his name had been erased from a sign. Now he realized that erasure had been only the first draft. They had intended to turn him into the desperate ex-fiancé who ruined a party, mishandled financial files, disappeared with sensitive documents, and maybe ran to a dangerous man because he had nowhere else to go. Every painful detail had been useful to someone. Even his loneliness. Especially his loneliness. "I almost gave them what they wanted," he whispered. Adrian pushed away from the counter. "No. You survived the trap without knowing it was one." Ethan looked up at him. "That sounds like something people say to make victims feel brave. I do not waste words that way." There was no tenderness in the sentence, but there was steadiness. Ethan found himself believing it. Before he could answer, the man from the study returned carrying a tablet. His face was controlled, but his eyes moved once to Ethan before settling on Adrian. "Sir, we found a connection." Nora Vale's mother sits on the board of a charitable foundation that shares donors with 3 Moretti shell companies. The foundation hosted a private gala 6 months ago. Caleb Reed attended. So did Nora. Adrian took the tablet, read for a moment, then handed it to Ethan. Ethan hesitated before accepting it. On the screen was a photograph from a society page, bright and polished. Caleb stood beside Nora in a ballroom, both of them smiling at the camera. The date at the bottom made Ethan's chest hollow out. 6 months ago. Ethan remembered that night. Caleb had told him he was flying to Denver for a last-minute investor meeting. Ethan had stayed home and cooked soup because Caleb said he would be too tired to eat restaurant food when he returned. He had waited until midnight. Then 1. Then 2. Caleb had texted that his flight was delayed. In the photograph, there was no airport, no investors, no tired obligation. There was Caleb, wearing the tie Ethan had given him for his birthday, standing close enough to Nora that their shoulders touched. Ethan set the tablet down carefully. If he held it any longer, he might throw it, and he refused to give the room that version of himself. He lied for half a year. Mrs. Alvarez's face softened, but she did not offer empty comfort. Adrian studied Ethan with quiet attention. This changes our next step. Ethan looked at him. How? Tonight the Vallas are hosting a private reception at the Langford Club. Caleb will be there. Nora will be there. Moretti representatives may be there too. If we move from the outside, they will deny everything and bury the rest. If we go in with proof, witnesses, and enough visibility, they lose room to rewrite the story. Ethan understood before Adrian finished. You want to go to the reception. I plan to avoid it. Now it may be useful. And you want me there. Adrian's answer was immediate. I want nothing from you that you do not choose. Ethan almost smiled at the careful wording, though there was no happiness in it. That is not an answer. Then here is the answer. Your presence would make it harder for Caleb to control the narrative. Your records would force questions. Your calm would ruin the version of you they are trying to sell. But it would be unpleasant, public, and possibly frightening. I can go without you. Ethan looked toward the window. The rain had nearly stopped, leaving the lake gray and restless beneath a low sky. Last night, he had walked away from a hotel because staying would have meant begging for a place that no longer existed. Tonight, walking into another room full of wealthy people might mean something different. Not begging. Returning. Being seen on his own terms. If I go, he said slowly, I do not want to look like the man they left in the rain. Adrian nodded once. Then you will not. Mrs. Alvarez stepped forward, a spark of satisfaction in her eyes. There is a tailor on Oak Street who owes Mr. Cross 3 favors and knows how to keep his mouth shut. Ethan looked down at the borrowed sweats, then at the folder, then at Adrian. I cannot afford anything like that. Adrian's gaze did not waver. You are not buying armor. I am providing it for a battlefield I invited you to enter. Ethan considered arguing, then stopped. Pride was important, but so was strategy. Caleb had used expensive rooms and polished clothes to make Ethan look small. Maybe tonight Ethan could use the same language against him. Black, Ethan said. Adrian's brows lifted slightly. The suit? Yes. If I am going back into their world, I do not want to look like a ghost in white. Something shifted in Adrian's face, barely visible but unmistakable. Approval, perhaps. Or recognition. Black, then. By late afternoon, the tailor arrived with garment bags and measuring tape, speaking with respectful efficiency as Ethan stood near the guest room mirror. No one commented on his thin wrists, his tired eyes, or the faint shadows beneath them. They measured him like he was real, like his shape mattered beyond how well he fit beside someone else. When the final suit was pinned into place, Ethan looked at his reflection and felt the first strange spark of distance from the boy in the rain. The man in the mirror still looked pale. Still wounded. But the black fabric sharpened him. The clean lines gave his trembling body structure. He did not look rescued. He looked ready. A knock came, and Adrian's voice sounded through the door. "May I come in?" Ethan looked at himself one last time. "Yes." Adrian entered and stopped just inside the room. For a second, he said nothing. His silence was not empty this time. It was weighted, almost reverent. Ethan turned toward him. "Well?" Adrian's eyes met his in the mirror. "Caleb Reed is going to realize he did not abandon someone weak. He abandoned someone unfinished." Ethan felt the words settle over him more warmly than the suit. Outside, the last of the rain slid from the window in thin silver lines. This time, when Ethan reached for the folder, his hands did not shake. The Langford Club stood on a quiet street north of the river, hidden behind limestone columns, dark green awnings, and a brass nameplate small enough to suggest that anyone who needed directions did not belong there. By the time Adrian's car pulled up to the curb, evening had settled over Chicago in a clean polished blue, the kind of twilight that made wet pavement shine like glass. Ethan sat in the back seat with the folder resting across his knees, dressed in the black suit that had been fitted to him only hours earlier. The fabric was smooth, the collar crisp, the shoes new enough that he could still feel the shape of them with every careful breath. He looked nothing like the man who had stood outside the Bellamy Grand Hotel with rain in his hair and roses in his hand. That person had not disappeared. Ethan could still feel him somewhere inside, shivering, stunned, waiting for the next humiliation. But now there was another version of him sitting upright in the quiet car, one who had learned the difference between being rescued and being owned, one who had proof in his hands and a locked room waiting if he chose to leave. Adrian sat beside him, dressed in a dark suit that made him look less like a guest and more like a verdict. He had not spoken much during the drive. He had asked only once if Ethan wanted to turn back, and when Ethan said no, Adrian accepted the answer without praise or pressure. That made the silence between them easier to breathe in. The car stopped. Through the window, Ethan saw people moving beneath the club's awning, women in evening gowns, men in tailored jackets, silver-haired donors, polished sons, bright smiles sharpened by money. Somewhere inside were Caleb and Nora. Somewhere inside was the story they had prepared about him. Adrian looked at Ethan, not at the folder, not at the suit, but at his face. "You decide how far this goes." Ethan swallowed. "And if I freeze? Then we leave. Just like that? Just like that." Ethan searched his eyes for the hidden condition and found none. Outside, a valet opened Adrian's door. Cold air entered the car, carrying the smell of rain on stone and expensive perfume from the entrance. Adrian stepped out first, then waited on the sidewalk. He did not offer his hand in a way that demanded performance. He simply stood there, a steady dark presence beneath the awning, and let Ethan choose whether to rise. Ethan picked up the folder and stepped out. The first few heads turned because Adrian Cross had arrived. The next few turned because Ethan Miller was beside him. Ethan felt the recognition spread, fast and silent, moving from face to face like a match touched to paper. A woman near the door blinked in surprise. A man Ethan remembered from Caleb's office leaned toward his companion and whispered. No one laughed this time. The difference was not the suit. Not entirely. It was Adrian at his side, yes, but it was also the way Ethan did not lower his eyes. Inside, the Langford Club glowed with old money. Dark wood walls, crystal glasses, framed oil paintings of men who had probably never been told no, and a grand staircase curving toward a private dining room above. Soft jazz played somewhere behind the crowd. Waiters moved with silver trays. Conversations dipped when Adrian entered, then tried to recover as if nothing had happened. Ethan could feel every stare measuring him, trying to place him into a version they understood. Discarded fiancé. Scandal. Guest. Threat. He held the folder more firmly and kept walking. Caleb saw him from across the room. The reaction was small, but Ethan caught it. Caleb's smile faltered. His hand tightened around his glass. Nora stood beside him in a pale blue gown, beautiful and composed, but her eyes sharpened the moment they landed on the folder. That was when Ethan knew Caleb's final warning had not been empty. Nora was not surprised to see him alive. She was surprised to see him prepared. Adrian stopped several feet away from the pair, not close enough to corner, close enough to make escape look impolite. "Reed," he said. Caleb's face rearranged itself into charm. "Mr. Cross. I did not expect you tonight." His gaze slid to Ethan. "And I certainly did not expect this." Ethan almost smiled. This. Not him. Still not him. "You expected me to disappear," Ethan said. Caleb's jaw tightened. Nora touched his sleeve lightly, a practiced gesture of comfort that looked perfect from a distance. "Ethan," Nora said, her voice soft enough for nearby guests to hear. "Whatever you think happened, this is not the place." Ethan looked at her fully for the first time. Nora's eyes were pale, almost colorless in the chandelier light, and there was something cold behind her careful concern. "I agree," Ethan said. "A private lie should not have required a public party." A few people nearby stopped pretending not to listen. Caleb stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Do not do this." Ethan did not move back. "Do what? Speak where people can hear me? You did that last night when you replaced my name." Caleb's face flushed. "You are upset. Understandably. But you are making yourself look unstable." The old word slid into the air like a blade wrapped in silk. Unstable. Ethan saw the trap as clearly as if it had been written on the wall. If he raised his voice, they would nod. If he cried, they would sigh. If he accused them without proof, they would look at Adrian and call him manipulated. So Ethan breathed once, slowly, and opened the folder. "Then I will be calm." He removed the forged transfer page and placed it on the small cocktail table between them. "Did I sign this, Caleb?" Caleb's face went still. Nora's hand fell from his sleeve. Ethan continued, voice even, clear enough for the closest guests to hear. "Because these are not my initials. Someone copied them. Poorly." Caleb stared at the paper. "This is not what you think. That is what you said on the phone before you told me Nora knew more than you." The room seemed to draw in one collective breath. Nora's expression changed for less than a second, but Ethan saw the mask crack. Adrian saw it too. So did several others. From the corner of the room, an older man in a navy suit stepped forward, his face pale with recognition. Ethan remembered him from Reed Holdings. Martin Hale, the company attorney. "Mr. Reed," Martin said slowly, "perhaps we should discuss this privately." Adrian's voice cut gently through the tension. "Privacy is how this became possible." Ethan looked at Nora. 6 months ago, you met Caleb at a foundation gala he told me was an investor meeting in Denver. The same foundation shares donors with companies connected to the Moretti family. Last night, men connected to that family followed me after Caleb ended our engagement. Today, someone demanded these records back." Nora gave a delicate laugh. "That is a dramatic story." Ethan nodded once. "Yes. But it is no longer just a story." Martin reached for the page, read the transfer line, then looked at Caleb with the expression of a man watching his own career approach a cliff. Caleb's confidence began to fracture. "Ethan, please." The word please touched Ethan strangely. Once, he would have given anything to hear it. Now it sounded like a key to a door he had already walked through. Before Ethan could answer, a commotion stirred near the staircase. A woman gasped. Glass struck the floor, not shattering violently, just ringing against the wood before rolling under a table. Nora had gone white. Her fingers gripped the back of a chair, her perfect posture collapsing into sudden weakness. Caleb turned toward her, alarm breaking through his panic. "Nora?" A club attendant rushed forward. Adrian gave one quiet instruction, and his own physician, who had been waiting near the entrance, crossed the room with practiced calm. No one pushed. No one shouted. The crowd parted as Nora was guided into a chair. Ethan stood frozen, the folder still open in his hands. The physician checked Nora carefully, asked a few quiet questions, then looked up with an expression too controlled to be casual. "She needs rest and a full examination." the doctor said. Nora's eyes closed. Caleb whispered, "What is wrong with her?" The physician hesitated just long enough for the room to feel it. "It may be early pregnancy." The words landed with a force no one could disguise. Caleb's face drained of color so completely that Ethan almost stepped back. Nora opened her eyes, and for the first time all night, true fear looked out through them. Caleb shook his head once, slowly. "That is impossible." Ethan heard the sentence and understood that the evening had not reached its final secret. It had only opened the door. For a moment, no one in the Langford Club moved. The physician's words hung above the polished floor, delicate and devastating, while Nora Vale sat in the chair with one hand pressed to her middle and the other gripping the armrest. Caleb stared at her as if the room had shifted under his feet. "That is impossible," he said again, softer this time, not for the crowd, not for Nora, but for himself. Nora's face tightened. "Caleb, do not!" The warning was small, but Ethan heard the fear inside it. So did Adrian. The entire reception had become a stage Caleb and Nora had not prepared for, and now every careful smile, every whispered rumor, every polished lie was beginning to loosen at the seams. Ethan stood beside the cocktail table with the forged documents still visible under the chandelier light, feeling strangely calm. He should have felt satisfaction. A colder version of himself might have enjoyed the way Caleb's confidence collapsed in public after what he had done the night before. But looking at Nora's pale face, Ethan felt something more complicated. Nora was not innocent. She had helped build the trap. She had worn Ethan's erased place like a tailored gown. Yet whatever secret had just surfaced, it had frightened her too. Adrian stepped closer to Ethan, not touching, but near enough that the room remembered he was there. "Doctor," Adrian said, "see that Miss Vale is taken somewhere private and comfortable." Nora looked up quickly. "No hospital." Caleb turned to her. "Nora, what is going on?" Nora's lips pressed together. "Not here." Ethan almost laughed at the echo of the words Nora had used against him minutes earlier. Not here. Not in public. Not where the story could escape. Martin Hale, the Reed Holdings attorney, picked up the forged transfer page with careful fingers. "Mr. Reed, this situation now involves financial records, potential identity fraud, and witnesses. I strongly advise that no one leaves until counsel is present." Caleb's face hardened. "You work for my family." Martin's expression did not warm. "I work for the company. There is a difference." That difference landed like a door closing. Caleb looked toward Adrian, and for the first time Ethan saw him without charm, without practiced softness, without the easy confidence of a man who believed someone else would always absorb the damage. He looked young. Not harmless, but exposed. "You planned this," Caleb said. Adrian's voice remained level. "You planned it. I allowed the room to see it." Caleb's gaze snapped to Ethan. "And you? You are proud of this?" Ethan looked at the man he had loved, the man who had once known how he took his coffee and which corner of his apartment got sunlight in the morning. "No," Ethan said. "I am awake. There is a difference." A murmur moved through the crowd. Caleb flinched because he knew people had heard. Ethan continued before fear could reclaim his voice. "Last night you left me outside a hotel and told me I did not fit your life. Then men connected to your debts followed me. Today, I found forged initials on financial records you asked me to organize. Now you are asking everyone to believe you are the victim because I stopped being quiet." Caleb opened his mouth, but no answer came. Nora's breathing turned uneven. The physician bent closer, speaking quietly, and Ethan looked away to give her what little privacy the room allowed. When he did, he noticed a man near the side exit, broad-shouldered, gray-haired, wearing a charcoal suit and an expression too calm for a guest. Adrian noticed him at the same time. The man did not approach. He only lifted his glass slightly toward Nora, then toward Caleb, as if offering a toast to a performance nearing its end. Nora saw him, and went still. "That is Vincent Moretti," Adrian said under his breath, only loud enough for Ethan to hear. Ethan's fingers tightened around the folder. The name had followed him like a shadow since the alley, but seeing the man in the room made everything more real. Caleb followed Nora's gaze and turned pale again. Vincent smiled faintly, set his untouched drink on a table, and walked out through the side doors before anyone could stop him without creating a scene. Adrian gave one small nod to a man near the entrance, who slipped out after him with quiet efficiency. No threats. No violence. Just movement, control, and consequences beginning to align. Nora suddenly reached for Ethan's sleeve. Caleb made a sound of protest, but Nora ignored him. Her fingers barely touched the black fabric, desperate but not forceful. "I did not know they would send men after you," Nora whispered. The room was still close enough to hear fragments, but the confession was meant for Ethan. "I thought they only wanted the folder." Ethan looked down at her. "And you were fine with that?" Shame crossed Nora's face, quick and real. "I was scared." Ethan thought of himself in the alley, rain in his eyes, 3 strangers blocking the way. "So was I." Nora let go as if the words had burned her. Caleb stepped forward. "Stop talking." Adrian's voice cut in, calm and final. "She should keep talking." Nora looked at Adrian, then at Caleb, then at the physician beside her. Something in her seemed to break, not loudly, not dramatically, but like ice giving way under too much weight. "Caleb was not supposed to be the father," Nora said. Caleb froze. The words moved through the reception faster than any rumor could. Ethan felt the meaning before his mind arranged it. Caleb had said it was impossible because he knew the child could not be his. Not because of timing, not because of doubt, but because there was a fact he had hidden even from the room he hoped would protect him. Nora closed her eyes. It was part of the arrangement. The engagement, the foundation donations, the transfers. My family owed Moretti. Caleb owed Moretti. They wanted a clean public alliance, and someone easy to blame if records surfaced. Martin Hale looked sick. "And Ethan Miller was selected for that role?" Nora whispered. "Yes." The room fell utterly silent. Ethan did not feel triumphant. He felt the final thread snap between his past and his future. Caleb had not stumbled into betrayal. He had chosen it step by step, then dressed it as necessity. Caleb reached for him then, perhaps out of panic, perhaps out of habit. He did not get close. Adrian moved only one pace, placing himself between them without touching either man. "No," Adrian said. One word. "Enough." Caleb stopped. Ethan looked past Adrian's shoulder. "You once told me I was too soft for your world," Ethan said. "Maybe I was. But softness was never stupidity. I loved you, and you used that love as cover. That is on you, not me." Caleb's face crumpled, but Ethan no longer needed to decide whether it was real. Martin Hale gathered the documents with visible care. "Mr. Miller, with your permission, I will contact independent counsel and federal authorities. These records need to be preserved properly." Ethan glanced at Adrian. Adrian did not nod. Did not instruct. Did not claim. He simply waited. Ethan turned back to Martin. "Yes. Preserve everything. Including the forged initials." Mrs. Alvarez had been right about armor. The suit did not make Ethan fearless, but it helped him stand while fear passed through him and failed to knock him down. As officials from the club began quietly moving guests away from the center of the room, Ethan stepped back from the table. The night was not over. The investigation had barely begun. Nora's secret, Moretti's smile, Caleb's collapse, all of it would stretch into consequences Ethan could not yet see. But one thing was finished. The version of him Caleb had written no longer existed. Outside, the rain had stopped completely. Adrian walked with him through the club's front doors and into the cool Chicago night. The pavement still shone beneath the streetlights, but the sky above the lake had begun to clear, revealing a thin line of stars over the water. At the curb, Adrian paused beside the car. "Where do you want to go?" Ethan looked at him, surprised by the question even after everything. Not back to my house. Not come with me. Where do you want to go? His answer came slowly, but it was his. Back to the lake house. For tonight. Adrian opened the car door. For tonight, then. Ethan stepped inside, carrying the folder no longer as a burden but as proof. As the car pulled away from the Langford Club, he looked through the rear window at the glowing building where his old life had finally lost its voice. The city moved around him, vast and uncertain, but Ethan was no longer drowning in it. He had walked through rain, lies, and rooms built to erase him. Now, for the first time, he was not being carried by someone else's promise. He was choosing the road himself. Adrian's phone vibrated once. He looked at the screen, and something in his silver-gray eyes darkened. Ethan noticed. It is not over, is it? Adrian slipped the phone away. No. Tonight was only the first time they were forced to tell the truth. Ethan looked out at the black water beyond the road, where the lights of Chicago trembled across the lake. In the distance, far south of the city, the industrial harbor glowed beneath a low bank of fog. Then next time, Ethan said, his voice quiet but awake, I want the whole truth. Adrian looked at him, not as someone fragile, not as someone owned, but as someone who had chosen to stand. Then we will find it. The town car moved along Lakeshore Drive, carrying Ethan away from the room that had tried to erase him and toward a war he had not asked for but could no longer avoid. Behind them, Caleb's world was cracking. Ahead of them, Vincent Moretti was meeting someone in the fog by the South Harbor. Ethan had taken back his name. Now he had to survive what came after.